Hello, welcome to this 29th video in my series titled Questioning Woke Psychotherapy. My name is Michael Dewan Herrick. I'm a psychotherapist and a life coach in private practice in London. In this series, I provide a critique of woke psychotherapy as informed by critical social justice theory. I also acknowledge its potentially positive contributions to the field in terms of useful ideas and good intentions. Finally, I offer tips about how psychotherapy might address issues of social justice without morphing into social activism based on a rigid ideological perspective. In this video, I want to talk about woke fragility. Unless you've been living under a rock, you've heard of white fragility, a term coined by the best-selling author Robin DiAngelo. According to DiAngelo, white fragility shows up as defensiveness in white people when the topic of racism comes up. White people can get angry or withdraw. This can hinder constructive conversations. According to DiAngelo, white people tend to feel uncomfortable when their preconceived notions or understandings of themselves is challenged. When white people are unaware of systemic racism and how it privileges them, as well as their own unconscious biases, they tend to react in defensive ways when confronted with it. This creates a roadblock to further dialogue. White people's fragility is a problem. Against common advice, I usually put my like and subscribe comments at the end of my videos. It seemed backwards to ask for likes and subscriptions before you've had a chance to decide if you actually like the video. But many people don't stay until the end and may have enjoyed the video anyway and forgot to subscribe. So, if at any point you decide you like this video, please remember to do one or all of the following. Give it a like, subscribe to my channel, click the bell for notifications, leave me a comment, and share it with a friend. I would greatly appreciate it. Thanks. Okay, back to our topic. Before proceeding, I want to acknowledge that for some white people, this is probably true. They might be fragile. It's worth considering and reflecting on it if you're a white person who reacts defensively to conversations about race and racism. Take a moment or two, or many moments, for self-reflection. Let's keep in mind, however, that being confronted and challenged about something we feel we have good reason for believing is true, and being told that we must believe something else, particularly something diametrically opposed to our current beliefs, can provoke defensive reactions for any of us, no matter what color our skin or what system of beliefs we hold. But while this is true, I want to make an important point. Raising reasonable objections to woke's challenges, both about the falseness of one's own beliefs and the veracity of the woke claim on truth, is not necessarily a defensive reaction. It's not fair or accurate to characterize all objections as merely avoidance of uncomfortable truths. It could be the beginning of a real conversation, one marked by give and take, by the exploration of multiple perspectives aimed at greater understanding. It could be this, rather than a monologue that more resembles a sermon delivered to a docile congregation. When the woke label any objections to the doctrine of systemic racism and white privilege as merely a white person's intolerance for the discomfort of facing the so-called truth, they are able to dismiss any and all objections. Voila! They avoid any conversation that might not keep them in their own comfort zone. Unless met with agreement and compliance, they throw their dummy out of the pram, as the Brits say, or translated into American English, throw the pacifier out of the stroller. In other words, they demonstrate the same fragility that they accuse others of. The woke's demands for trigger warnings and safe spaces as protection from the existential threats of microaggressions begs the question, who is being fragile here? And when an objection to their doctrine is framed as hate speech, a life-threatening attack from a wrong-thinking person, their fragility turns into viciousness. Their fragility does not just put an end to the conversation. It can initiate vengeful retaliation, such as death threats, doxing, deplatforming, the loss of livelihoods, and the destruction of reputations. One way to understand this is to recognize that in terms of Jungian psychology, fragility is the woke's shadow. It is something within their own psyche that they don't want to know. Instead, they see and condemn it in others. The more zealous and emotionally charged the attack, the more likely it is coming from an unrecognized shadow. Fragility is just one among several other woke shadows. For instance, their strong rejection of meta-narratives, while insisting on the critical social justice meta-narrative about the oppressed and the oppressor. Their insistence that all so-called realities are socially constructed, and therefore none can make a better claim on the truth. This, while simultaneously asserting the unchallengeable validity and superiority of their own claims, like men can become women. Their attack on colonization, in other words, anything thought or done by Western civilization, as an unjust exertion of power and dominance. They try to decolonize everything, while simultaneously colonizing every major institution in the effort to enforce conformity to their own ideology and agenda. This is not an exhaustive list of woke shadows, but the last I will mention is that their crusade for anti-racism, with its rejection of colorblindness, turns out to be just another version of racism. The more one looks, the more one sees that the woke strident claims and accusations boomerang back on them. They enact the very things that they claim to oppose. It seems to me that if they're allowed to carry on unchallenged, they will tear down everything they perceive as an oppressive norm. They will deconstruct every structure of society that they deem unjust, and every epistemology that yields knowledge they don't like. They will thoroughly decolonize everything. They will erase the wealth of our cultural inheritance rather than build on it. This will be done on the assumption that it's all simply oppressive. There will be no real examination of the value of what they destroy, no sense of how it came into being to serve a purpose. Because it is obsessed with finding the faults of our ancestors and our perpetuation of those faults, there's nothing to preserve. It must all go so that they can get on with remaking society in accordance with their own zealous beliefs. If all of this comes to be, I believe they will create a world that is a worse version of all that they condemn. Remember, according to the woke, there are just two options for people. You are either oppressed or you're an oppressor. If the oppressed are no longer oppressed, guess what they must become? The oppressor. It's not just hypothetical speculation. The 20th century showed us what happens when this rigid binary is applied at scale. And a word, genocide. Will the so-called dialectic of history result in an actual synthesis and the hoped-for evolution to a better social reality, as Marxists claim, or will the tension between opposing forces simply flip and suffering be transferred to a different group, as we have so often seen? Philosophically speaking, in order for a thesis and antithesis to be resolved into a synthesis, the truth of both must be included, as the integration of apparently contradictory truths that binds them together and produces a larger vision of the truth. Socially, it is upon this that a new and better society might hypothetically emerge. This cannot happen without dialogue. This cannot happen when one side demands silence from the other and accuses it of fragility whenever it asserts the antithesis to their thesis. Nor, I hasten to say, will there be dialogue or even the possibility of synthesis if those with the antithesis are unwilling to listen to and wrangle with the thesis. That means that we of the anti-woke need to listen to and wrangle with what the woke have to say. At the same time, we cannot allow ourselves to be silenced by the accusation of white fragility, nor should we be lulled into idiot compassion by the woke's own sometimes histrionic fragility. Both thesis and antithesis need to be robust and resilient, while not rigid, and both simultaneously open to considering what does not confirm its own beliefs. a tall order, but I'm afraid to say that otherwise we're doomed to a so-called dialectic of history that is more a cycle of repetitions, a flip-flopping of oppressor and oppressed, rather than a movement forward. I don't know what moving forward would actually look like, but I have a strong sense about the alternative. I'm reminded of the saying, those who do not learn from history are doomed to repeat it. You may have heard this other version that adds something else, which is, and those who do learn from history are doomed to watch others repeat it. This may be, but I'm not satisfied to just sit back and watch. Even if I'm doomed, I'm not going gently into that good night. That's all. Thanks for sticking with me to the end. I hope you'll join me for my next video. Until then, take care of yourself and each other, and do not go gently into that good night. Bye for now.